Reaction from Dr. Marcus Papadopoulos, publisher and editor of Politics First magazine. Doctor, good evening.
Good evening.
President Assad warned on this very channel this week that foreign intervention would, quote, spark a disaster which the world won't be able to afford. Is London not taking him seriously, then?
Well, of course, President Assad is absolutely correct when he says that NATO intervention in Syria would be catastrophic. The Middle East is the most volatile part of the world. And, of course, Syria is a central player in the Middle East, both geographically and politically. But I think that Western political and military planners are aware of that. I think what we're seeing at the moment is two wars in regard to Syria. One literally being fought on the ground between Syrian militants and the Syrian armed forces, and also a war of propaganda and talk by American, British and French politicians, for example, of possible intervention in Syria. I don't think we should take that so seriously. I think it's more designed to actually invigorate the Syrian militants, who are of course the proxies of the West, and at the same time to try and scare the president, to scare the government of President Assad, and to try and demoralise the Syrian armed forces, which of course are fighting a very long, protracted, bloody war. So I don't think that such talk, for example, by the chief of the General Staff of the British Armed Forces today should be taken too seriously. OK,
of course, there's another element to build in here as well. Damascus has previously warned, isn't it, that it may possibly unleash its chemical weapon stockpiles, allegedly the biggest in the world, on any invading forces if they ever came. Would Britain take that risk? Actually, let's follow it up. Do you think Syria would ever deliver on that threat, or is it empty talk?
The whole concept of countries having nuclear, biological and chemical weapons is, of course, to defend themselves against an external threat. So theoretically, of course, if there was foreign intervention in Syria, be it by NATO or Turkey or Saudi Arabia, theoretically, the Syrian government could use it against such forces. Let's take France. France is a member of the nuclear club. If France was invaded, would the French government resort to using its nuclear weapons? Theoretically, yes. But at the same time, I think what we need to realise is that if there's going to be Western intervention, a military intervention in Syria, or Turkish or Saudi Arabian military intervention in Syria, it will only go ahead with America's consent. Britain and France, for example, will not take any military action on their own against Syria without American consent. From a practical point of view, both armed forces are very stretched at the moment. The British and the French armed forces both are experiencing severe cutbacks at the moment in their budgets. They're overstretched in Afghanistan. Okay, so I don't think we should take it too seriously about British military intervention in Syria.
Could it be done
America
more subtly?
Is the top dog and decides what happens in these sort of countries.
I've got you, but could it be done via the back door then, if you like? Britain wants a revision of the EU arms embargo to Syria to see if weapons could be supplied to the rebels under a humanitarian excuse. If that happened, would there be a need indeed for direct military intervention?
Well, possibly not. I think if the arms embargo is lifted, and that is a big if, because there's a whole load of issues, legality issues regarding that. But if it was to happen, we would probably see a similar situation to Afghanistan in the 1980s, when Western governments were arming to the teeth the Mujahideen, including Osama bin Laden. And of course, if that was to happen in Syria with the arming of the Syrian militants, the war would go on and on and on. And of course, so many more people would die and the violence would just increase dramatically.
Doctor, while you're on the line, I want to get your thoughts on the SNC as well, while we've got a moment. Big meeting in Qatar this weekend. The Syrian National Council says it's now united the opposition into a broader coalition. However, the main Syrian-based activists say they've ditched the SNC. So how much credibility and influence do these exiled officials even have at this point?
Well, I think from the very beginning of the conflict in Syria, the big question is, how much influence do these groups outside of Syria actually have within Syria? And I think there's a strong argument to say that they don't have much widespread support within Syria. But, while you touch on the topic of what's been happening in Doha in the last few days, I think a fundamental point which is being missed is that the future affairs of an independent, sovereign country are being discussed by foreign governments in a foreign country. That is absolutely outrageous. We're talking about the United Nations, the pillars of the United Nations, state sovereignty, being completely undermined. I mean, if there was a domestic crisis, for example, in Spain, would it be acceptable for foreign governments to convene in Rome, the capital of Italy, to discuss the future affairs of Spain? It's absolutely outrageous, and it's also illegal under international law.
Very good questions you raised there and put to us. Thanks for your thoughts. Dr. Marcus Papadopoulos, publisher and editor of Politics First magazine.
Thank you.